Hello, and everyone. Welcome to the Wednesday edition of it's just the weekly rankings with Jim, but also now the playoff edition too for Wild Card Weekend. Thankfully, I think the NFL has removed the Super Wild Card Weekend moniker. That was so dumb a couple of years ago that we had to keep slapping Super in front of that stuff. So we can go back to Wild Card and recognize that other than two teams, Chiefs and Lions on bye, we're going to have a number of different NFL matchups I think are intriguing. Certainly, it'll be a great reprieve after Week 18, which was effectively a nothing burger outside of one game. What a brutal Week 18, and yet NFL wants to add another week onto the NFL schedule. I'm not sure if that's a correct decision, as we saw last week, but we're going to get the playoffs, and I think it's going to be a really fascinating start here with a couple of games on Saturday, a couple of games Sunday, and of course the Monday night thriller Vikings-Rams, a rematch. Looking forward to talking that one with you too. Jim, you do the you do a number of different playoff content for us, but you put together a ranking system for the quarterbacks, running backs, and receivers on the site right now. I think you can lean, or I think a lot of viewers can guess as to how you imagine the playoffs will go based off of how these are ranked. And I think you could certainly mention that Vikings-Rams game a little bit later on in the show. But just so everyone knows, rotowire.com/try gets you 48-hour access to the site. You can see Jim's rankings for that stuff, but also the overall principle of all the playoff content we have. I'll have my weekly betting sheet posted, I think either today or tomorrow, the few of the prop bets going over the spread. So we're talking everything wild card weekend playoffs here on the Wednesday show. And I think it's best to start out with this Chargers Texans game, which I think is the most boring of the wild card games. I'm not sure. Is that kind of where you're at too, where this seems sort of cut and dry as to what you're expecting and who's going to win?
I was saying 3 weeks ago, well, we're going to see the Texans in the 4:35 Saturday slot because except for like the one like last year, that was like the only exception.
Well, I think they did every single time the Texans have made the playoffs. They have been the 4:30 Eastern Saturday slot all 7 times, dating back to like the 2010s.
That's right. They were last year because it was against Cleveland, and nobody. I mean, in theory, it was a fun game, but again, nobody's excited, and they draw that same thing. And who better to be in that time slot with them than the Chargers? So I just thought that was very funny. But Joe, before we get to the game real quick, with the playoff rankings, everybody's going to think I'm nuts because when you do these playoff rankings, you've got to like go through the entire bracket, right? And eventually, if you don't want to ruffle any feathers, you're not going to pick any upsets. It's going to be the 1 or the 2 seed going to the Super Bowl in each conference. But if I break the games down and look, I got the Lions being one and done. I got them playing the Vikings again. And if that happens, I think, honestly, the Lions actually showed too much in that Week 18 game because the Vikings, this game, we all thought the last team with the ball was going to win. And the Vikings came out with their hair on fire blitzing, and they tried their man coverage with lesser corners. I don't think they could do that again. I don't think they could replicate that because now that they know what's coming, if they play them, these teams were even before. I think the Lions showed too much. Anyway, I just neither here nor there. But those who look at the sheet, I don't have the Lions players going deep.
I like this, Jim, because let's have a natural conversation about this and then transition. We'll get to the Chargers-Texans game. We don't have to go by order on this. Let's talk about Vikings-Rams first, because I think this is one of the more intriguing contests overall of the wildcard weekend slate. And arguably, I have a lot of Rams fans in my life, which is unfortunate for me because they are very snobby and I think a little bit not understanding where their team is at in relation to the rest of it. Might be the West Coast bias. It might be the weather for the most part. Maybe they can all just enjoy the sunshine far too much and it gets to their head. I have far too many Rams fans that were excited to face the Vikings. Oh, well, we beat them early in the regular season. And you're telling me that watching that Sunday night game, that's the Vikings team I have to be worried about? I'm like, you could say the Vikings had a horseshoe up their ass, and I'm not sure if you could say it on YouTube. I'm going to say it anyway, for the past 2.5 months, and they did. I think by the Packer-Viking game, every single one-handed, ridiculous in-traffic catch the Vikings guys made, the Packers didn't, and that's where the Packers lost. Well, that all came to play Sunday night. Every single possible horseshoe-related incident didn't go in favor of the Vikings. And it's an easy argument in my mind to say if Sam Darnold makes 2 throws that are anywhere in the realm of Justin Jefferson's catch radius, it's a completely different ballgame. But the score really didn't indicate what I thought that outcome ended up being for the Lions-Vikings game. The Lions might be the better team. The Lions might have been motivated for the number 1 seed. It was in Detroit as well, too. There are all those consequential things. One of the lessons I learned from my dad, and this could be a different NFL era altogether, it's really hard to beat a team 3 times in a season. And that is what the Vikings will have to do if they end up beating the Rams here Monday night. So from this matchup, the Vikings are relatively healthy. So are the Rams too. Obviously, Christian Darrisaw, probably one of the bigger significant injuries the Vikings had, but have covered that with that Cam Robinson trade back around the trade deadline. Aaron Jones's status probably matters a little bit too. He's been begged up the past 3 or 4 weeks. Yeah, Cam Akers get a stint towards the end of that Sunday night game against the Lions. I mean, if it is Cam Akers as the back for the Vikings, it's a different outcome, but we haven't heard that at all. And I sort of think as long as Sam Darnold plays even 80% to the level that he's played this season, this should be a scenario where the Vikings offense cooks the entire time.
Yeah, I'm excited about the Vikings in this matchup. The Rams are a good defense. Scheme helps them. They have a number of good pass rushers. Jared Verse would be better than good, but none of them are game wreckers. And against this Minnesota offensive line, if you don't have a game wrecker or if you don't have like a complicated blitz package, they are going to hold up just fine. Cam Robinson on his own, he will struggle in one-on-one situations. They'll give him chip help with the tight end. Not really worried there. The rest of the line should hold up. And in that case, I do not believe that there's going to be enough pressure on Darnold, and the corners are not nearly in the level to hang with Jefferson and Addison and even TJ Hawkinson for that matter. Mm-hmm. And I just think realistically, Kevin O'Connell, after the wake-up call against Detroit, should be on point in this game. And like you said, I just think they're able to move the ball. The running game here should be inconsequential. If they get some running production, fine. I think this is a game where they can get away without him. Aaron Jones' production has been down, as you mentioned, the last few weeks. He's played, but he has gone through various ailments, and he has been nicked up, and it is very clear he's not 100%. So maybe they need to use him a little more in the screen game. But for this game, like you said, I think the offense should be just fine.
The over-under for this is around 47 points. The Commanders Buccaneers game, which I'm excited to talk about as well, that is by far the highest one of the wildcard weekend slate. But the other in that range of Rams Vikings is Bills Broncos. I'm going to phrase the question this way because I think it's an important part to contextualize for folks. Of the two games, Rams Vikings, Broncos Bills, which one do you think actually scores more points? Because I think it's overwhelmingly Minnesota Rams, but maybe I'm missing something with the Bills and Broncos. But like I think there's going to be offense galore Monday night.
Both games have a lot of potential pitfalls in them. On the surface, if the game goes exactly to plan, I think you're right. But that's going to lead us to finishes going to the Rams side of the ball because we talked about the Vikings, and they should be able to have a good scoring game. But the Rams, that offense struggled down the stretch. The last 3 games, Matthew Stafford averaged 153 yards, and he only threw 1 total touchdown in those 3 games. That offense is not humming right now. Cooper Kupp, less than, I believe, 30 yards in 4 of his last 5 games. Yeah. The targets, now he had a 90-yard game in there as well. So it's like he's capable of that occasional game. But 4 of the last 5, he's done nothing. Over half of the passes in the last 2 games that Stafford completed were to Puka Nacua. So it's basically the Puka show. But here's the thing, Joe Bartel. So the Rams are their best when they're against zone defense. And that's when Sean McVay just shreds zone with Nacua and, again, maybe Kupp. But we saw Minnesota change their stripes against Green Bay a couple weeks ago. Green Bay is a team you need to play man against because they can shred a zone. Minnesota changed their stripes in that game. They played heavy man coverage. I think in this game, it's the same deal. You play heavy man coverage, and you also slide some extra help toward Puka Nacua. So you don't let him just go in all those soft spots in the zone and shred it up. You get a hand on him at the line. You get a second corner's direction, and you say, you know what? You're not beating us. And Kyren Williams, he's had some nice numbers, but he takes a lot of carries to get there. This guy was 5 yards per carry last year. He's 4.1 this year. He is not the same elite running back. So if that Vikings defense, which is great against the run, and if they play man defense, we don't know what version of the Rams comes out. Joe, you and I talked about this all season. The Rams will come out and they'll look like world beaters one week, and they'll look horrible the next. But the Vikings defense plays man, and they blitz, and they stop the run as they've been doing all year. this could be a game where the Rams don't score more than 13 points.
Yeah, no Blake Corum either, out with that broken forearm rest of the postseason, however long that is for the Rams. I agree with you. And now we have to think more so, okay, what was probably week 5 or week 6 that the Rams beat the Vikings. That was when all those guys were eventually returning healthy. You had Cooper Kupp and Puka Nacua. That might have been one of the first games back for Puka. I guess I'm kind of forgetting. Maybe it's a bit earlier or later in the season. Either way, we are now in the one and done scenario of the NFL season. There isn't any more, let's show tendencies, or we're going to call X play to make sure it's on the play chart for someone to have to worry about. Now it's, you're going to do the thing that helps your team win every single week, no matter what the matchup is. When you have made yourself so dominantly focused on Puka Nacua, and even to, it seems, the absence of Cooper Kupp, it's an easier thing to identify for a good coach, not Joe Barry, Packers former defensive coordinator, but in the case of Brian Flores, that is a really good defensive coach for the Vikings. I think the Vikings have a ginormous coaching advantage, and this is acknowledging how much I like Sean McVay. I also think they have a talent advantage as well too. So I believe the Vikings are also going to win. Right now, only favored by 1. You could probably get it as just a straight pick them in certain books as well too. So I like the Vikings as well, but we'll have to see. If they were to win, that will more than likely put them in line to face the Lions. We're going to find out as the rest of the postseason kind of goes through. You'll know Monday night whether the Vikings are going somewhere else or rematching the Lions from the week before. Let's talk about that Bills-Broncos game next, because I already alluded to the over-under. Again, right around 47 points. Bills favored by 8.5. This is the second largest difference in terms of spread. Ravens Steelers is the other one, and I think fairly so. Is this the year? I think that's what we have to ask this question first. Is this the year Josh Allen and the Bills finally get over the hump? Because unfortunately, in the number 2 seed spot, they won't get the benefit that the Chiefs will have, effectively a free ride to the AFC Championship game. They will have to face the Ravens, more than likely, if the Ravens are to take care of the Steelers in that round 2. And it'll be a battle of who is supposed to win MVP in the division round matchup. Let's not look ahead too much, but I think the Bills, and that Joe Brady isn't getting discussed as a head coach option, I think is actually really surprising. But the Bills' offense has been fantastic on not really tipping their hand. Could we see kind of what happened last year, where Rashee Rice for the Chiefs, for example, and Travis Kelce caught on during the playoffs, or is it still hot hand as the receiver and Josh Allen leading the way? Because you could do that against the Broncos, but even that secondary, I think, could pose some problems for this Bills offense.
Absolutely, this Broncos defense can cause problems for the Bills receivers. Keon Coleman is a work in progress. He'll get their games 1 or 2 catches. And sometimes he gets a long one, and that works out beautifully for them. But honestly, and I know he's much smaller, but I think Riley Moss could do a decent job on him if he needs to. And if Amari Cooper plays, he has a personal family issue. He isn't back yet. Hopefully he is back as of this recording on Wednesday. Again, hopefully everything's fine with Amari Cooper's family, but that's most important. But otherwise, if he shows up, Patrick Surtain's on him. That's a bad matchup, because that's a nightmare matchup. And then even in the slot, Jaquan McMillan, he can do a great job covering up on Khalil Shakir. So stylistically, and this Broncos team will play a lot of man, and Patrick Surtain will cover. And if Cooper doesn't play, they're in a bit of trouble. And I think the run game has a little bit of an advantage for the Bills. The Bills offensive line, they're a bigger group, and the Broncos, we talk about their front 7, they're fast, but they're small. And you could get downhill on them. So they might have a little advantage in a run game. And the other thing is, with the man defense they play, remember, when you cover, you turn your back to the quarterback. Guess what that means? We talk about this all the time. Josh Allen, look at the corners aren't looking at me. If I get past the first wave, I can run for 15 yards here. So those are some real interesting side notes here. Ultimately, the Broncos do pose a very good challenge for the Bills. Josh Allen will be the wild card, of course. He's the one that can overcome that.
Yeah, James Cook, 18 total touchdowns this season. Kind of goes underreported given the Josh Jacobs and Derrick Henrys and Saquon Barkley's the world. But you would have thought with Josh Allen as your quarterback, 18 total touchdowns would not be in the realm of possibility. But Cook's explosiveness has really played out that way too. Just over 1,250 total yards. My goodness, you could tell I'm a little bit rusty after the holidays. Yeah, I think the opportunity for Josh Allen on his rushing over, if it's anywhere in the range of like 50, I think makes sense. We talked about this with Anthony Richardson on the Lions a couple weeks ago. It's the same concept. If you're playing man defense, you're exposing yourself to the possibility that you're rolling to a different direction, or you're not able to watch where Josh Allen is. And you have to do that because Khalil Shakir, Amari Cooper, Keon Coleman, the way this offense is built for the Bills, there isn't any one guy opposite of the Rams game, for example. If you just make sure where's Puka Nacua, you can't do that for the Bills. And I think that opens up the possibility for Josh Allen to do things. Bo Nix is probably, if you're doing like a entire postseason draft, probably like quarterback 10 or 11. Because the idea is, well, the Bills are going to beat the Broncos. There's no way Bo Nix ends up making it through. But if you're just doing a 1 week DFS slate, or on FanDuel or DraftKings, they'll likely offer passing props among all wildcard weekend quarterbacks. I think it's kind of interesting to consider Bo Nix as the possibility is one of the more top end fantasy options this week. I don't know. I mean, the Bills defense is pretty good. Sean McDermott's, I think, a very good coach as well, too. How do you see Bo Nix performing in his playoff debut?
It's going to be interesting. The stage means something. The fact this is a high leverage playoff game on the road in a pretty hostile environment, that will be something that we can't quantify, but has to be thought about with Bo Nix. What I'm looking at in this game, Joe, Sean Payton is an excellent coach, and he has done a lot with that offense over the season. He's made a lot of things happen. Play action game works very well. They really integrated Marvin Mims in the last month. Combination of wide receiver screens that are well blocked, and he gets yards after the catch, deep shots. He has added an element to that offense to go along with Courtland Sutton. And if people haven't been watching the Broncos closely, they're not realizing that this offense has really changed a bit. But still, the running game is not effective. Jaleel McLaughlin has put up some good yards per carry. I still contend that when he's on the field, most defenses think they're going to pass and they play back. I notice there's extra bodies in the box when Javonte Williams or Audric Esime are in the game. Neither here nor there. We know the Bills play a base of nickel. They say beat us with the run. We really don't care. We're going to deal with the pass. I think that works against the Broncos a bit, but Sean Payton, he is going to come up with a game plan here, and it's probably going to get Nix a bit comfortable. I think the Broncos can hang in this game. I think this is the sneaky competitive game of the week, Joe.
Interesting. Okay, I have a different vote on the sneaky competitive game of the week, but I'm with you on that one. I think the AFC, we all want to see the Bills and Ravens in round 2.
Yes.
We all want to see one of those two teams take on the Chiefs because we don't want to see the Chiefs win 3 straight. That's sort of where we're at here. But that's just because we want to see that doesn't mean it's going to be a guarantee to occur. And again, of the wild card weekend contests, and I can say that even as a Packer fan, I feel very comfortable saying this one has the opportunity to be an upset. I'll direct it to MSA in the chat, who asked Steelers +10, a decent bet or stay away. And that's my entry into this game might be a little bit closer than we all think. It's been announced, or at least been reported today, Zay Flowers likely not playing for the Ravens this week. Ravens still favored by 10 points against the Steelers. Of course, Russell Wilson looks like he's back to being completely a pumpkin. The whole Steelers offense has no idea what they're doing. George Pickens is actively giving up during contests right now. The vibes could be worse. They could not be worse. And yet, Jim, you look at the last times the Ravens and Steelers have faced each other. Last matchup, which was like early December, Ravens won by 17. The previous 6 contests before that were all within 7 to 2 points. Dating back to 2019, there has not been a winner of this game by more than 7, except once, just recently with the Ravens. So I know Lamar Jackson is your MVP, or not but is one of the MVP favorites. He's been fantastic this season. I think the Todd Monken offense has clearly evolved from last year into what's been a tremendous thing. And Lamar Jackson is the unicorn cheat code of the NFL right now. But it's an AFC North game against Mike Tomlin. And frankly, it's a playoff game that Lamar Jackson has to prove again and again and again until he wins the Super Bowl that he can succeed in these elements. I think the Ravens win, but I would not be betting them to win by 10 plus points. Where are you at?
It's a complicated game, Joe. It's very complicated. And you brought up a lot of the key points. It's very hard to dismiss the rivalry between these teams. The fact that for the most part, the Steelers have had Lamar Jackson's number. Lamar Jackson, he threw 3 touchdowns in that last game they played, 34-17. threw for 207. Didn't have to throw much in that game. But the point is, Lamar Jackson struggled against him. And that's a narrative we can remember. And Mike Tomlin is an underdog. We know that narrative that, well, the Steelers almost always cover. And then we saw Philadelphia blow the doors off them a few weeks ago. I think we have to demystify a bit here. And it's not going to be easy. Here's what I want to point out. These teams played early in the season. Steelers won 18-16. Very, very sloppy, crazy game. At that point of the season, the Ravens were a bad defense. They were completely busting coverages. The pass, you could attack them through the air and have little issue at all. And all of a sudden, the Ravens are one of the better coached teams in the league. John Harbaugh's like a businessman. And when he sees a problem, they're problem solvers, and they solved problems. This team doesn't give up coverage busts anymore. They have become now one of the top defenses in the league when they were a bottom quarter defense in the league. And Pittsburgh comes into this game. That offense has very little chance for success. Russell Wilson, remember those first couple of weeks, he was hitting those deep shots and life was good. He's not hitting many of those anymore. Teams are putting the shell up over him, saying you can't do much else. All you've got is some flat passes to Jalen Warren and Najee Harris. Their teams are giving you a little Pat Freiermuth underneath, but that's not going to get a lot of offense generated because there'll be a holding call. There'll be a loss of 2 on a 1st and 10. And this team is very poor at sustaining drives. And that's my biggest concern. I don't know how the Steelers can magically coax up offense here. Start with that side, Joe. Go ahead.
Well, you're right. So then in my mind, it's can the Steelers defense, like they have for much of the season, just maintain, just hang around? And can one player, one sequence go right where the Steelers put their implied total more to 20 as opposed to 13? Because it's not an outcome for winning 4 straight games. I don't think anyone's going to say the Steelers are a Super Bowl favorite. In fact, Vegas would likely have them as one of the least likely teams to win, if not the least likely team to win. But it's not about winning, at least 4 straight playoff games this week. It's about beating one team that you know very well and against a quarterback that has been exposed often in the playoffs. I think Lamar Jackson's a different quarterback than he was 4 years ago against the Titans or whatever it was. It's not Greg Roman calling dumb plays and using Patrick Ricard all the time to limit the offense. This is a completely different thing. But with no Zay Flowers, it's Rashad Bateman, it's Mark Andrews, and it's Derrick Henry. And Derrick Henry changes the outcome of this too. But I think it's very easy to say the Ravens are not going to score 3 touchdowns. And in that scenario, at least the Steelers covering the 10-point spread makes sense. But to have them be competitive, have them be close, I mean, that's where I'm at. I look at the Steelers' past 3 playoff games. Last year against the Bills, lost 31-17. The year before, I guess 2021, lost 42-21 against the Steelers. Even that Browns game, right, where Baker Mayfield became the hero that he was, then got cut for reasons to be unclear. Browns won 48-37. I don't think that's happening with Zay Flowers out. I don't think the Ravens are going to be able to do that kind of game, that kind of scoring. I could be wrong, though, but that's where I see this game being closer because the Ravens are limited offensively.
So I can't go a show without saying styles make fights, right? Can't do this, especially in the playoffs. The playoffs is really all about styles make fights. And playoffs are what we call hyper-specific game plan. Bill Belichick did it in the regular season. Most coaches don't. In the playoffs, we see more of that. I want to point out the difference between the 2 matchups between the Baltimore offense versus the Pittsburgh defenses here. In the first matchup, Derrick Henry went 13 for 65 and a touchdown. Also, he had a fumble early in that game that was very uncharacteristic. Can't bank on that happening again. But the point was, Derrick Henry was not a big sustainer in this game. He was not able to take over the game. Why did he come back in a second game and go 24 for $162? Answer was easy. Game planning. What the Ravens realized from film was that the Steelers are one of the best run defenses in the league when the quarterback is under center. We've seen against multiple opponents, if the Steelers face a run game where the quarterback's in the shotgun, they are a below average run defense. Baltimore figured that out. In the rematch, they had Jackson in the gun as opposed to under center. And all of a sudden, you have to play the run very differently because those linebackers that could creep up, they all of a sudden can't creep up the same because of the shotgun because you have to worry about the intermediate pass. Changes the math on things. When it's under center, you've got time to adjust. It lowers the adjustment time. Derrick Henry bulldozed them. And that was a problem that we saw at points in time when the Eagles played the Steelers. They took them a little while to figure it out. they started to do it a little bit later in that game. They didn't do it early, but we saw it directly in that game. Case in point, under center runs no good, shotgun runs very good. So I think they figured out the code. And if that's the case, this is a Derrick Henry game. Derrick Henry gets downhill. And if Pittsburgh tries to overcompensate, that's when Lamar Jackson does the backdoor run. And that's when he'll get, his, Mark Andrews on an arrow route. So I really think Zay Flowers being out does hurt them, but I don't think Pittsburgh has an answer for the shotgun run like they did in that last game.
Again, Ravens won 34-17 back in week 16. Derrick Henry's 160 plus yards rushing, and it was 17-10 at halftime. So you could be like, well, Jim, it's because the Ravens are way better and the Steelers can't do anything offensively. Well, the game was close enough where that wasn't just here, pound the ball 40 times with Derrick Henry. In fact, he only had 24 carries. Jamie in the chat asked Lamar over 50 rushing yards. Again, I think I would rather go the direction of Josh Allen if we're betting which quarterback goes over 50 plus rushing, but you're shaking your head. No, I would agree with you, only because if the spread were to go the way that Vegas thinks it will, you don't need to expose Lamar Jackson. There isn't any reason to have him go ahead and carry the ball 10 times or whatever it is, to kind of put him in that spot where over 50 makes sense. So
the Steelers have been very good at defending Jackson as a runner. Jackson tried to run in that last game. He had 9 carries, 22 yards. Every time he tried to go, they had 2 bodies on him. So it was like they were looking for him. Now, again, can they over adjust on Henry? Maybe. But my guess is they're so dialed in on Jackson. I think that what they've shown, can Jackson break one run for 60 yards? Yes, he can. But the way the Steelers attacked him in that last game, and they've attacked him in past contests, it would be a low probability bet. Now, so again, he always could break the one long run, but the probability says we're looking more at 30-ish yards. We're not looking like 50 in this one, I think.
I agree with you. Anything on the Steelers offensive side of things, or you could move on?
Well, I just the simple fact that George Pickens appears to not be himself. He appears to be checked out. He had so many drops. You could tell he wasn't running his routes, with the aggression he needed to. And without him in that offense, I mean, you're looking at Calvin Austin's a nice little slot guy. You're looking at Van Jefferson, Mike Williams, I just don't know where they get it done from. Jaylen Warren will certainly catch some passes and be effective. He was 5 for 44 in the air in that last game. I do think you could bet the over on Jaylen Warren for either receptions or receiving yards. Outside of that, the run game, I wouldn't count on much there. The Ravens stopped the run very routinely without putting extra bodies in the box. Russell Wilson, 22 of 33 for 217. He did throw a couple touchdowns that last game. One is Cordero Patterson. Yay, team. Let's go. Pat Freiermuth has been busy, but even in the last game, the Ravens had his number 3 for 16, and that was a late game when Freiermuth had been cooking already. I get it, Joe, and I get why you're taking the points, and it makes logical sense in a lot of ways. I just think this Ravens team right now is playing at a completely different plane than the Steelers, and I think that kind of will wipe the intangibles out, because really, if you're betting the Steelers, you're wisely betting the intangibles, because those intangibles have been there for how many years?
Right.
So you're right about that. I just think this is a completely different version of the team. I think the style of the shotgun run is really going to punish the Steelers. But again, I can see both sides, but I am more inclined to say the Ravens get this one done.
We did a SiriusXM postseason annual draft. We do it every single year now, where it's just trying to see who accumulates the most points across your team that you selected throughout the entire postseason. There wasn't a single Steeler picked at all. In fact, CJ Stroud and Jordan Love were taken over Russell Wilson and over Bo Nix as the only 2 quarterbacks not selected in the 6-team 2-quarterback draft that ended up happening for SiriusXM. You can find it on my SiriusXM, or you can find it at SiriusXM Fantasy Twitter. I think they had it last night, or mine, JD Fantasy Sports, up there right now. But there was not a single one. No George Pickens, no Russell Wilson, no Pat Freiermuth. You had to start a tight end. No tight end was selected. I think most of us, at least in this group, all agreed, and that was with 2 Steeler fans in that draft, that there was not going to be a second opportunity to get points from the Steelers this postseason. The Steelers ended the season on a pretty bad note. Let's go over another team that ended on a pretty bad note. My Green Bay Packers, who will face the Eagles in the 2-7 spot. You could say it was it didn't matter kind of game when the Packers lost to the Bears on a game-ending field goal by Cario Santos. And that's true. With the Commanders winning on a last-second touchdown of their own, the seeding wouldn't have mattered. But the Packers lost effectively everything in that loss to the Bears. Christian Watson, done for the season, torn ACL, among other things, likely won't play at least for portions, if not all, of next season. And that will be the technical end of his rookie contract at that point, too. So the Packers will likely need to draft a receiver upcoming with the Christian Watson injury. You had Jordan Love suffer possibly a funny bone injury, if not worse. Lost feeling in his hand. Reportedly, he could have came back and been able to play. But Matt LaFleur wisely saw all the carnage happening to everyone else and said, let's just keep Jordan Love out. Josh Jacobs scored his one touchdown, then was removed from that game as well, too. And the Packers nearly did win that game. It's just we have not seen them look good for a full game the entire season. And now we'll have to go against arguably the third or fourth best team in the NFL, if not a little bit higher, in the Eagles. Now, the one difference maker is going to be Jalen Hurts' status. We don't know yet if he is going to end up being able to play. He has not come out of concussion protocol yet, but the Eagles really weren't forced to do that up until this point. You think about when that concussion occurred, the Eagles had effectively locked in the number 2 seed, didn't play basically any of their starters week 18. There was no reason for ulterior motives to rush the concussion protocol. And I'm not trying to imply, Jim, that the NFL or NFL teams would ever put their player at a point of risk. They would never choose to do that. But if you did want to have Jalen Hurts out there for an important game, it certainly wouldn't have been over the past 2 weeks. So the Eagles will have to activate Hurts from the concussion protocol, or he'll have to have himself approved through it, activated or approved. And the assumption will be that he's going to play Sunday. So with Jalen Hurts there, Saquon Barkley healthy, A.J. Brown healthy, Devonta Smith healthy, and the Packers losing Christian Watson, no Jair Alexander, a pass rush that's been inconsistent. I don't know why the Eagles are only fair by 4.5. Well, how am I supposed to be optimistic as a Packer fan, Jim? I have no idea.
I don't get that line either. It's a difficult line to figure. You think it should be like a 6.5, maybe even a 7. That's how I think this line should be. And I think it may be recency bias. The last time we saw the Eagles in a big game was against the Commanders, and their defense got lit up. It was a weird game. It was chase mode, and we saw all those points by the Commanders. That's not the Eagles defense. The Eagles defense is an elite coverage unit. They're a very, very strong unit against the run. They have an excellent pass rush. This is one of the most complete defense in the league. They had a breakdown. They just had one of those days. It was the game where Jalen Hurts got injured. They were on their way to a blowout win early. It was a very weird game. The Packers, this injury to Christian Watson may have only had 620 yards in 15 games. Not an impressive season. But what Christian Watson brings is the one player who could beat you vertically with consistency. And he forces the defenses to respect that part of the offense, which opens up everything else. Without him on the field, Romeo Doubs ain't scaring anybody. Jaden Reed is always misused, and he's in the slot 77% of the time. And Dontavian Wicks, you know what? Throw him the ball because there's a 1 in 3 chance he's dropping it. So all this, and the Eagles all of a sudden, who normally keep the shell over the top with Vic Fangio to stop explosives, that defense is walking down in this game. They are walking way down, and they are going to make things a little more difficult in the short and intermediate area of the field because they will have no reason to think they're going to get beaten deep. And Jordan Love, maybe not 100%. We don't know how that deal is. I just don't see how the Packers string together points. Now, Josh Jacobs has been Superman this year, but this is a tough run defense, and they're going to be able to commit extra bodies if they want to stop him. That's a problem.
The scenario in which the Packers win is basically what happened last year when the Packers were entering the postseason at a significantly better spot than they were in the regular season. But that was because Jordan Love looked awful for about a month and a half, 2 months. So by default, anything was better than what was being shown then. You had a pick 6 by Darnell Savage. You had another interception early in the second quarter or mid-second quarter, and you had the turnover differential. And then you could kind of force the Cowboys into one-sided game plan. And that can happen against the Eagles. Like if you make Jalen Hurts have to be the passer, not a read option guy, not have the opportunity to hand off to Saquon Barkley, not be a one-score game. If you can get out to a lead early, get a turnover advantage, convert that into points, and so you're up 2 scores midway through the second quarter, that can turn the clock a little bit on an offense and can make the game script look a little bit different. The only issue is you're going against one of, if not the best running back in the league, an offense that doesn't care what sequence or spot that they might be in, that they're going to keep playing the way we want to all season, and also has the 4th down cheat code which is the QB push there, that can get them an extra 2 yards. So you could play every drive a little bit differently, especially in the postseason. I'm shocked that this is only 4.5. The early look ahead line last week was 3, and I immediately jumped on that as a Packer fan because I knew the Eagles would be in a better spot. So I not only think, and if you're doing like what we did on SiriusXM show yesterday or last night, a full postseason odds, I not only think the Eagles win this one, but would realistically be poised to face the winner of the Buccaneers-Commanders game, and they are well suited to win that one too. I think the Eagles, much like the Chiefs, are going to just get an easy walk-in to the NFC Championship game, having not really faced any real opposition for the first 2 weeks of the postseason. Is that where you're at too?
Yeah, and the thing that nobody really talks about because it's not fun to talk about it is the Philly offensive line is completely healthy. Like nobody's even nicked up. That extra bye week they created for themselves in week 18, they didn't, that's a huge deal. This team comes in rested. That offensive line, they are going to completely eviscerate the Packers at the point of attack. They do that with most teams they play. They are going to get downhill. They're going to cause a lot of problems for Green Bay. This is a great matchup for Saquon Barkley. Packers are not great against the run. And their pass defense, like you said, Jair Alexander's out. He made things a little bit difficult for A.J. Brown in week 1 for a little while and a few plays here and there. But without him, the drop-off in talent, and again, we don't know if Jalen Hurts is playing. We're kind of expecting he is, but we'll see. But Devontae Smith, Dallas Goedert's back. It's just way too much. It's just way too much, and I really don't know what kind of answers they're going to have. And the pass rush isn't great if it needs to get there, and Jalen Hurts, in theory, be able to beat that. I think even if they have to go with Kenny Pickett in this one, I think they still win the game.
4th-round rookie Evan Williams, which is really kind of their sub-safety, the Packers safety, or at least allowed Javon Bullard, 2nd-round pick, to be more of a slot corner for them, has not played the past 3 weeks or so. I don't know if Evan Williams is out there too, and that's another secondary player along with Jair out that's going to make a difference. And I think the Eagles cruise. If it's Kenny Pickett, that's a little bit different. That game becomes far closer to me, and maybe Vegas is covering themselves a little bit with that, and they are more concerned about Hurts than we are, but it's the playoffs. Jalen Hurts is going to play. He hasn't played the past 2 weeks. Let's not kid ourselves. So yeah, as a Packer fan, one and done, doom and gloom. I'm all there. We're already dialed in wholeheartedly to that. We have almost 300 people live watching right now. If Jim Coventry, the man, the only Jim Coventry, has helped you out at any point this year, which he has to have, given the 55-hour days he seemed to be working throughout the entire NFL season. If Jim's helped you at all, it would help Jim if you could subscribe to the RotoWire YouTube channel. We are only 200 subscribers away from hitting our preseason goal. We have obviously the whole postseason ramp up to that, lots of different prop bets as well as we get to the Super Bowl. There's many opportunities, but if Jim has helped you at all, at one iota this season, if you could subscribe to the RotoWire YouTube channel, help us achieve what we were looking for, that would be fantastic. And 3 people watching live right now, if every single one of you subscribed right this second, be awesome.
We're there.
We would have hit our goal and well exceeded it. But if nothing else, send the subscriber over for Jim. It's free. It doesn't cost anything to go ahead and subscribe to the RotoWire YouTube channel.
And it's the RotoWire Fantasy Football channel.
Yes,
we have a main channel which has a ton of followers, but the football channel is the one that just started this year. And if you're watching this on YouTube, that's the actual channel it's on. We're not on the main channel. We're on the football only. That's the one where we're trying to grow.
Thank you. Sorry, RotoWire Football. It's RotoWire Fantasy Football or RotoWire Football channel?
Yeah, ask me that and I can't answer it. I just say if I type in RotoWire Fantasy Football when I do a Google search, it comes up.
There you go. Okay, yeah. Again, if you could throw a subscribe that way, that'd be awesome. That would really help what we're trying to achieve here, and really push more of the YouTube content that we do throughout not just the regular season, but a lot of the offseason ramp up plans as well too. It's not been revealed or announced just yet, but I think you can feel safe saying both Jim and I will be around in your YouTube or listening lives from a football perspective in the weeks to come. So a couple more playoff games to get to. I kind of alluded to at the start of the show. Chargers Texans to me feels like the most cut and dry copy and paste game of them all. Maybe it should be Steelers Ravens too. We kind of disagreed on that a little bit, but I would assume the Chargers handle this pretty convincingly. I saw this on the Fantasy Football Reddit page earlier today. Who would be next year's Rachaad White, a running back that you're drafting in the 3rd, 4th, 5th round, who ends up getting overcome by a backup running back that ends up being way better than they were at any point? I think the answer is Joe Mixon. And nobody mentioned on the Reddit page that was fine. There was the ETNs or Rico Doddles. Mixon is tailed off towards the end of the season. He's obviously going to be a little bit older as well too. And with this incoming rookie class being as vaunted and as good as I think it will, the Texans adding at least one back early on to supplement and I think eventually overtake Joe Mixon makes a lot of sense in my mind. This matchup against the Chargers defense, I don't know if Joe Mixon does anything. I don't know if CJ Stroud does anything. And the Chargers can just sit in the ball. This feels like a 19-10 Chargers playoff win in which the entire fourth quarter, the announcers are talking about, oh man, Chargers against the Chiefs. That's going to be a really good battle. AFC West. It's like you're doing the look ahead already 10 minutes into the fourth quarter. Where are you at with this? Do you see any other outcome than what I kind of just described there?
The line just looks like a trap. It looks too good. I know they're on the road, the Chargers. It's 2.5, not 3.5. And that interests me. That it makes it interesting why they're not pushing 3.5 on this. The Texans are at home. They're not a good team. Their offensive line is not good. They haven't given Joe Mixon run to room. How about room to run instead of run to room? That might be a little bit better.
Either one. The Texans offensive line has been so bad they can't do either one.
It's discombobulated. Yeah. Exactly my point. That's too funny. If Mixon runs to the left, the blocking's a little bit better than to the right. The right is a disaster. Overall, the pass protection, if a team sends bodies, it's a real problem for that line to pick up, and Stroud's under a lot of pressure. Here's the thing. Chargers are a very well-coached defense. They play a great zone concept. They pass off things well. I could see play action and Nico Collins getting going here. I could see Stroud having a game. He hasn't had a game much this year, and he doesn't have other weapons. And the Chargers probably will be smart enough to say, you know what? We are going to bracket or cloud Collins because John Mechie ain't beating us. He's questionable for some reason on the injury report. Robert Woods ain't beating you. Dalton Schultz ain't beating you. So, like you said, Joe, I have to think they have to just put too much coverage on Collins and say somebody else beat us and mix it again, like you said, not really going there. So, logically, the Chargers should win this easily. Texans are a good defense. They're a very good run defense. The tackles block very well for the Chargers. The interior, meh. So, it could be a little bit of a slugfest, but we know the Chargers will put an extra fullback in. They'll put an extra tight end in. They'll load up bodies. So you're right. It just on paper, the Chargers should win this game by at least 6 points.
All right. So I want you to hold on. I'll pause here because I want you to think what you said there, and now try to put yourself back in the same mindset we had last year. Because I was looking at my weekly betting sheet I did last year. I picked the Browns to beat the Texans. I read what I wrote over, and it was effectively the same thing. Browns defense is really good. Joe Flacco now gives the Browns offense an identity that Deshaun Watson didn't. The Texans are young, but do we know if they could do it in the postseason? And the Texans surprised everyone, handled the Browns, actually did fairly well in the divisional round as well, too. That's my one concern is I did the same thing last year, and I ended up being wrong. And I hate being wrong, especially repeating the same mistake. So I want to make sure I'm not repeating the same mistake this time too.
I'm glad you brought that game up last year. The Houston coaching staff out-coached the Cleveland coaching staff in that game. Bobby Slowick had that game. So they knew that Cleveland would play about 45% man coverage. This is last year's playoff game, okay? So just so you understand where everybody else out there, in case I lost you for a minute. And what Bobby Slowick did was he designed some very good man coverage beaters. And they were able to get enough chip help to slow down the passing attack, and they used some play action. And they just had Nico Collins basically roasting the man coverage because they weren't often putting a safety over the top. Basically, they out-coached them. That's how that game went. And then once Cleveland was playing from behind, it was always going to be a problem because they didn't have an offensive line. That offensive line was battered. So Flacco, at that point, the quick passing game was no longer an option. So that game was a coaching thing. I don't think Jim Harbaugh and his staff get out coached here. Now, do I have a little bit of a concern that Greg Roman goes too much into the run, pass? That's the one thing. That's the fly in the ointment. And the Texans, like I said earlier, they're a very good run defense. And if Roman gets stubborn, and we've seen that throughout his career.
Oh, yeah.
If he gets too stubborn, all of a sudden, the Texans make a play. Let's say they make a defensive play, score a touchdown. Let's say Nico Collins breaks the defense, gets a long touchdown, puts the Chargers on tilt a little bit. Those are where this game gets iffy. probability says the Chargers. For some reason, I'm finding it in my mind to lay off of this game. For whatever reason, I'm spooked that Greg Roman could come out and muck things up.
I feel far more confident about Vikings over the Rams. I feel far more confident about Eagles over the Packers. And I feel fairly confident that both the Ravens and Bills will win. You could argue about the spread. Again, I like the Vikings to cover, and I like the Eagles to cover their spreads. I just think the Ravens and Bills will win and win comfortably. Maybe not quite 10 and 8.5, whatever it is, but they'll win comfortably. That's the reason why I'm probably staying off this game. And also, it's not like the Chargers are world beaters and have a lot of talent wins as well. They have won games because they're well coached. They're going to be well coached again. And they've won games because they just have better coached talent than a lot of the other dregs in the NFL. There's either the haves or a lot of have-nots. And that the Chargers are just above that have-not level doesn't mean that they are just an automatically better team. I just think the Texans are also barely above the have-not level. They shouldn't have been in the playoffs. It's just the AFC South is so bad, so awful, that by default, the Texans can kind of get there anyway.
Joe, the money line's minus 162 for the Chargers to win. For some reason, I know it's a bad money line. I just feel way more comfortable taking that than laying 2.5. I just look, the one thing we'll quantify is this. Justin Herbert is a superstar quarterback,
Yes. Mm-hmm.
and he doesn't get the credit he deserves. And we've seen since when J.K. Dobbins got hurt, this team had to lean on Herbert more. But you notice when Dobbins came back, they didn't only make it the Dobbins show. They didn't go away from Justin Herbert as much as they did earlier in the season. And I think they figured something out here. So I still think the Chargers win this one. The 2.5 line spooks me. So the money line to me is a bit better. But they have a massive advantage at quarterback based on the way C.J. Stroud has played this year in the given version of their offense. Mm-hmm. Justin Herbert, regardless of circumstance, is able to win. And I don't think the Texans ultimately have the offense that could put the Chargers in that really bad spot of being down double digits.
Again, 6 games in the wild card slate. I think FanDuel will likely offer this if it's not already out there, it could be by the end of the week. Would you say this is the most likely game, or one that you'd say that you'd want to bet on as the lowest scoring of the 6 wildcard games across both teams? Just lowest total points scored. Is it this game?
Yeah, I think this one does qualify as that, because I think Jim Harbaugh has been through this playoff thing before. And I think if they get a lead that's comfortable enough, I think they'll want to play conservatively and drain clock. Mm-hmm. I think they'll be happy with that. So, yes, this is the game I could see ending up 17-13, 16-14. This is the one I could see ending up in that real low-scoring area. So I agree with you on that. Yeah. And the over and under at 42.5, it's not an aggressive line, but it's not that 38 line either.
Right. And what you could do in this scenario is find another teaser component, tease the under up. So it'd be more like closer to 49.50 there. I don't think there's any way that gets that range. And then you could say you'll put the Eagles as like +3 in that tease, for example, if we like the Eagles or the Vikings, whatever else you could do with that. So I think that's the outcome that I've had a lot of success with this season, is finding different teaser pieces and take a higher totaled under for the Chargers Texans game. Final playoff game, at least, that we're going to discuss here. Commanders traveling to Tampa Bay. This is the one I'm most excited about. It might be inconsequential in the playoff realm. I don't think the Commanders will do anything if they win the following week. Frankly, if the Buccaneers were to win, I don't think they do a whole lot against the Eagles either way. But you could not be hotter entering the postseason than what it feels like Baker Mayfield and the Buccaneers offense could be entering the season. Enter the postseason. And Jaden Daniels, I think we hit a rookie wall, and he's at least thrown the rope over and is beginning to climb up that point. Like, if he hasn't already went past the rookie wall, we're getting darn close, because he's been really impressive towards the end of the season as well. That Eagles game that you talked about, effectively keeping their playoff hopes alive, that was a really big deal, and I think it meant a lot to the Commanders offense. Commanders the 6 seed, Buccaneers the 3 seed. Buccaneers favored, at least in some books, like 3.5, 2.5 in that range. And the highest over pretty comfortably at 50.5. I don't know if I'm betting the over, but if you were to tease it down, like if we just talk about the Chargers, Texans, teasing the total under, I would tease the total higher here. So it'd be like a 43.5. Like I think there's gonna be a lot of points on both sides.
I'm comfortable betting the over here. There's when I do the Bookies Plus show on Thursday, which will be on the Bookies YouTube page, and I'll tweet that out. But that'll be one of my 3 best bets of the week. I just don't see either defense stopping the opposing offense. The Washington side, look, they've got a few names. Sandstrell's played good at corner. They got Jonathan Allen back at defensive tackle, but they don't stop the run. They don't stop the pass. They don't get much of a pass rush. Tampa Bay should have little trouble. That offensive line's very good. They have really no answer for Mike Evans. Jalen McMillan's running hot. Bucky Irving's been a menace. And all that said, yeah, like I said, Baker Mayfield's playing very good football. And when he needs to, he runs. And that's crazy. You wouldn't think that, but when everything breaks down, he just sees the opening and he takes it. So I do think they'll have little trouble scoring. But as you point out the other side, Jaden Daniels is playing great. And I noticed also some teams had gotten good at keeping him in the pocket, but he's gotten some slippery runs out through the middle of that pocket, which earlier in the season in a couple of games he was struggling to do. So he's become a little more versatile there. The Buccaneers can't play defense. They just simply are terrible. Jamel Dean's had a decent season, but otherwise everything's just kind of adequate. They blitz a lot. They get moderate pressure, but not too much. But teams just can move the ball on them. And we saw Spencer Rattler carve them up in the first half last week before the Bucs finally cinched things down. I think Austin Eckler in the screen game, you want to get Levante David and KJ Britt isolated on him because they can't cover. That's a huge mismatch. Terry McLaurin will get his, as he often does. Zach Ertz is a great tight end matchup. And those are the 3 common chords. Running the ball might not be great for them. Brian Robinson, this is not a good matchup for him. But Daniels ran for at least 66 yards in his last 3 games. I throw out that Dallas game, he only played a half. So, and he had 27 yards anyway at that point. So he's been running for yards. I don't think either team stops each other, Joe. I do think I seem to be intimating the Buccaneers, I think overall have a little more going for them. They have that blitz could help them at the right time, getting 1 turnover, maybe 2. And Baker Mayfield, I think with having Mike Evans and Bucky Irving, it's a little more versatile. I think the Buccaneers shade this game. I don't want to lay the points. I think they could win, but they might just shade them. It might be like 1 or 2. They could cover, but I like the over better, Joe.
Well, I think Jalen McMillan has emerged over the past 3 or 4 weeks as a quality number 2 receiver. That was my one concern really week 10 onward. You had Mike Evans and Chris Godwin get injured that same game. Okay, great. Baker Mayfield's going to throw to Cade Otton 30 times, but that doesn't matter in the postseason. What are you going to do? And Mike Evans has been awesome still. I think he clearly is one of the top 15 receivers yet in the NFL. And he is more of a difference maker than what I think Terry McLaurin can do. We've talked about how Terry McLaurin can get schemed out. I think Terry McLaurin is a really, really good receiver and you can do things with him, but Cliff Kingsbury has been reluctant to do that. That's not the case with Mike Evans and Baker Mayfield. That relationship, that matchup, that combo can single-handedly win you games. Kind of like what I think you were saying with the Texans game where Nico Collins and CJ Stroud could maybe single-handedly win the game. There's some concern there. But Jalen McMillan being the other piece to that equation, yeah, I like the Buccaneers offense a lot. In that SiriusXM postseason draft, I ended up taking Baker Mayfield, 3rd round, Bucky Irving 4th round. I ended up getting Chase McLaughlin. I took the Buccaneers defense as well. I think there's a very realistic path for the Buccaneers to either win 2 playoff games or at least win this one. And if the Commanders were to beat the Buccaneers, I think the Commanders kind of get trounced by the Eagles. Or technically the Lions in round 2, but it's a nice setup for the Buccaneers against that Eagles matchup in round 2 if it plays out that way. But I am most excited offensively to see what we have from Jaden Daniels in his postseason debut and to see what this Baker Mayfield offense can hopefully continue to do in the postseason. I like the Buccaneers to win. If we're doing just money lines for the postseason, I'm taking the Chargers, I'm taking the Ravens, I'm taking the Bills, I'm taking the Eagles, Buccaneers, and Vikings. So effectively all the favorites, maybe not the Vikings, Rams, depending on certain books, but all the favorites, I guess. I'm as lame as they go. I'm just Joe on every fantasy team name for a reason, Jim. It's because I have zero creativity, and I guess zero creativity in my postseason picks as well. So going with the 5 favorites and maybe 6, depending on what books you're looking at for the Vikings.
Hey, Joe, so parlays are the dumbest thing in the world. I get it, but it's the playoffs, so I have a little fun. So basically, here's what I did for my parlay. So first of all, I took the Vikings -1.5. So that was one leg. I took the over in the Washington-Tampa game. I did take the Eagles -4.5. I do like the Broncos plus the 8.5. I do think they're going to make this game scrappy. I laid off Steelers Ravens. No, I didn't. I laid the minus 485, put it as a money line winner. And then I took the Chargers as the money line winner. Even with those two bad money line odds, when you're putting them in a parlay, it ended up being really good. Now, am I going to win? Of course not. It's a 16 parlay. It's not going to win. But some of those legs, if you're making your own bets, I think if you want to mix in a Ravens money line, again, I think they could cover. Joe, you think they may not? I don't want to take the risk. Just don't want to take the risk. So parlay, you throw even a minus 485, it still helps your parlay odds.
So I'll say this: you are excellent in everything you do, Jim. I can only speak for myself. I picked, I think, above 20 games over 500 last year. Every game against the spread. I actually ended up being about 35 or close to 40 games above the spread this year. Last year's postseason, I went like 3-15. So maybe don't take my money line parlay bets this time. If anything's postseason is at all representative of what we saw last year. Last year, I thought there would be more upsets, at least early on. There wasn't. So if I'm thinking there's a lot of favorites winning, maybe I could be wrong again too. That'd be great for my Packer team. I'd love to see actually something positive. I'm not really expecting it. So we'll be back in this same time again next week, talking divisional round matchups as well too. Get you the prop bet part of things, parlay part of things too. It's a whole smorgasbord we get to throw together now that we are done with the regular season, done with these matchups as well too. Styles makes fights. Jim and Joe makes a lot of really good content. Again, subscribe to the RotoWire Fantasy Football channel if you can. We're only a few subscribers away from getting to our mark that we have for the preseason. If you love Jim at all, if you just want to give Jim a high five, you can't do it because we're virtual. If you could subscribe to the RotoWire Fantasy Football channel, that'd be awesome. Again, thank you everyone in the chat for participating along as you have all year. Back in this time again next week. Thank you everyone for listening.